First of all, I think this is a great project. I think it's going to be beautiful and a great way to honor a great man. So thank you for all the effort that you and your team have done to bring this to fruition. Yes, yes. Thank you, everyone in the audience that's helped. My question was whether or not it's actually an expenditure, an authorized expenditure of tourist development tax. And in order for it to be, it has to have a primary purpose of developing tourism. The statute outlines things that can be spent on building a sports facility, marketing, some other things. And then it says it has to have, the local government has to have a legislative finding that determines that it is primary and directly to develop tourism. And so I asked the deputy county attorney if she could find anything that, like there's attorney general opinions, et cetera, if there was anything that would help support this project. Kristen, will you come up and speak to it? I know you don't have a whole lot to say about it, but what you have, would you please share?
So looking at the plain language of the statute under subsection 5, in my opinion, I do not see any particular subsection in which this particular project would fall as an authorized use.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to say that when this process first began and the organization was told what they needed to do each step of the way, they were told that this was the appropriate step. And something that I've noticed in this process, just my observation, it seems that there's been a lot of cat and mouse. And I strongly believe that, well, I may not say strongly believe, it seems disingenuous because they've done everything they needed to do. People didn't think they would get all those signatures. I was one of the people knocking on doors getting signatures. They got the city and the county on both sides of the bridge to agree on something, which you all know is very rare and hard to do.
I don't have any other questions, but I don't think anybody on this council has said that we do not want to fund this. What we said is what we're trying to do is verify that these funds actually may be used to fund this project. We were told originally this group was going to raise all of the funding through private fundraising efforts, that they were not going to use any public dollars for this project. But here we are with a $750,000 request. The city has funded $250,000. The state has funded $700,000. So I take personal offense about this cat and mouse conversation. I think there's been a lot of conversation, and this whole thing has been very fluid.
This is, as a member of the TDC, this was an issue that was brought forward to see whether or not we could utilize tourist development tax to help pay for the Memorial Plaza, the Chappie James Memorial Plaza. I think there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainties about who actually will own it. And I know that according to our attorney and Kristen Hool, if it's owned by the city, the entire thing, then it could be potentially a legitimate TDT expenditure. Those questions, I think, remain uncertain, although I did speak with the mayor last night I was there for an unrelated topic, but I asked him about that specifically, and he said it wasn't his intention to have the city own the plaza. So the thought process was that we should get an attorney general's opinion, if you guys would agree to that, to see whether or not, given this circumstance where the city owns the land and a not-for-profit would own the Memorial Plaza and the static display and the jet and maintain it, would that qualify for TDT funds? And so I told them I would bring that request to this board. No guarantee the board would vote to do it, because I do believe in order to get an attorney general's opinion, it would require a vote from this board. So that was the discussion, and that's what I brought. Thank you, gentlemen.
As far as the ownership of Wayside Park, that is owned by the city of Pensacola. And as far as the plaza, it'd be no different than the cabanas that are currently out at Wayside Park. It'd just be a structure on the actual land that's owned by the city of Pensacola. The elements, the city of Pensacola has in fact purchased the statue. We, as a 501, have purchased a flagpole, which would then be donated to the city on our behalf. We just happen to consummate that transaction. As far as the airplane, the city's already entered into a memorandum of agreement with the Air Force Museum out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So that's what's happening there. With regards to tourism, that is really the question, right? I mean, I saw the notes here from an email. Just let me read it to you here. You know, the big concern is whether or not the board recognizes this as a matter of tourism. I would suggest to you that it most certainly is, for a number of reasons. One, it's going to be right there at the entryway of the city. It welcomes over 100,000 people a day, vehicular traffic across the bridge, and it invites not only tourists to our city in a very grand manner, right, an airplane and a flag and a statue of General James, but it also invites them to recognize this city because it recognizes its heroes.
Chris, let me ask you this. Who is communicating with the city? Because it seems to me, speaking with the mayor last night, that there's a disconnect between, you know, what they think and then what you're saying. So I guess, who is interfacing with the city and the leadership over there?
That's a good question. I mean, keep in mind, we started this process, let's just say, with the naming of the bridge back in 2018.
Yep.
So we've been at it for 5 years. We were working with the previous administration, with over Mayor Robinson. And our communications with Mayor Robinson's office was open, transparent. And to the press and to the public. We've never said anything or done anything that we haven't presented publicly, okay? And so there has been a change in administrations as a result of the election. And so since the beginning of that transition, we have been attempting to communicate and have a meeting set with Mayor Reeves. Just now, like 24 hours ago, we were able to set a date for September 13th.
As you saw at the TDC meeting, you know, I don't necessarily believe that there was any kind of pushback to the funding request. I think most of us feel like it's a worthwhile expenditure if it's legal, though. So that's what brings us here, and I just want to make sure. But there was questions about who owns the property, who owns the monument. So in order for us to compose a cogent request of the Attorney General, which, I mean, we've got to be dead on, or else it'll get kicked back, or it could take a long time.
And from David Baer's comments, he made no mention of ownership. All he cared about was whether or not this was going to be a feature that enhanced the county's ability to attract tourists.
Yeah.
I suspect that the answer is unequivocally yes. It does attract tourists.
The fact pattern has been evolving. Every time I'm asked, it's a different fact pattern about who owns what in this particular case. So if we're going to ask the question, I would like to be able to set forth what the actual fact pattern is going to be once this thing is on the ground.
So for the record, we need to have another Attorney General's report, is what you're saying?
If the board's direction is that it might be interested in obtaining an Attorney General's opinion, you can direct me to ask for that. But I'm just telling you, it's a worthless endeavor unless you actually can express what the plan is going to be for who's going to own what.
Well, who's going to own it? That's the simple question. Who's owning it? Who's going to own it?
It's city of Pensacola
So the
property.
city's going to own it?
Yes.
Okay.
And so what we do here with the Veterans Memorial Park is they have
Chris,
they
I
have
don't,
an
mean,
association.
I don't mean to cut
I
you
know.
off, Chris. I mean, we're just going way too long. The city's going to own it. You got affirmation from the city that,
It's their property. Who else is going to own it?
I'm looking at Charles Baird to nod or shake his head. And yeah, I think, but
The city is indicating through their legal staff that it is not their intention to own the memorial or maintain it.
Chris, what I'm going to do after I hear from Michael, I'm going to make a motion that asks the attorneys to clarify with the attorneys from the city and the city staff, A, is it going to be owned, the entire thing, by the city? And then, once we know that, if it is indeed going to be owned by the city, then is it a legal expenditure of TDT funds if it's a city? I believe this board can make the determination.
All right,
Yeah, call it go.
if I
So-
can finish.
sorry-
So that's
sorry
good
for cutting you off.
clarification, because I wasn't sure if that meant the intent. Second thing is, as far as tourism, I was in Albany, Georgia last week, Ray Charles Plaza. I definitely think it's a tourism attraction. I don't see how it couldn't be. People stop there. It's a first black four-star general. I think it absolutely. So I'm in support of that, and that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so I will make
Thank
that, I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
we have a motion.
Second, and all we're doing is getting the Attorney General's opinion.
Correct. After
We're not
staff-
even getting an Attorney General report.
After staff ascertains ownership post-construction.
Okay.
Right? You can do that, right, Allison? All right, that's
All
my
right,
motion.
so that's what we got. So Allison, you'll work with the city council and the mayor and the legal department?
Yes, sir.
And to get clarification. Okay.
Yeah, so first, I wasn't at the meeting, so I'd hate to speculate too far into what was said or not said. The only clarification I want to make is it's very clear who owns the property. I think that was maybe misstated on my behalf, innocently misstated. I think it's pretty clear who owns the property. I mean, the city owns that parcel. That's not what's in question. I think perhaps what was in question is who has license to use it and all that, and that's where it sits right now. So as we stand here today, there is no formal agreement signed, only been voted on by council, signed for that parcel. But again, that's why we're meeting with their leadership to get all of that figured out and buttoned up. That's what our hope is. As far as the TDC dollars, again, I think you're going to have to talk to them about what they believe are tourism uses and not. There are restrictions to it. I do vaguely recall some of those things as Visit Pensacola board chair where, you can't use it on infrastructure, you can't use it on some certain things. So again, I'm not schooled up enough to be able to say what you can and can't use it on. I do think it would be a positive amenity for the community, but I would certainly defer to that board on whether that they see that as the rightful use of the $750,000 asset. Yeah.